Welcome to The World Today. I'm Sana Maqbool, and in today's show we will be talking about Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to the US and his resolve to highlight the Kashmir issue every chance he gets in the United States and at every meeting that he will be engaging in. Also, we'll be talking about what is to be expected from his address to the UN General Assembly on the 27th of September. And along the sidelines, we will also be talking about the Indian Premier Modi's rally in Houston, in which, of course, President Donald Trump was also present. We will be taking a look at the statements made by both the leaders and what those signify. And in terms of US's role in mediation of the Kashmir dispute, whether or not a meeting is going to be taking place, as Trump had hinted earlier. To talk more about this, we are going to be talking to international affairs expert Dr. Amna Mahmood, who has been joined us in the studio. Thank you for being with us, ma'am. Of course, you must know that the reports coming in from the rally in which a large number of people participated. However, a large number of protests were also taking place outside the venue. Of course, in India, it's been taken as a sign of a diplomatic victory for India. Do you think that is so?
Yeah, obviously, it's a show of power. If you remember, in the first visit of Pakistani Prime Minister, there was big gathering of Pakistani Americans, and Prime Minister address. So India was just countering that. And looking at the population difference of Pakistan and India, they are 5 times to Pakistan's population. So if they are having 50,000, Pakistan was already having more than 20,000, so it's not a large difference. And talking about Houston, that is basically Texas is a South Asian state. So gathering of 50,000 was just a peanut there. But obviously, it was show of power, and Indian and American media is boasting that. Basically, you see the tone set there was against Pakistan, and that showed the Trump's tilt towards India, and that is very much clear. So Pakistanis who were having more expectation from Mr. Trump, and as he uttered a few words about mediation, and that those words were countered by India, and India simply refused that any such offer was or request was made with to Mr. Trump. So it means that Pakistan should not attach much hopes with Mr. Trump that he can come with for mediation, and that too in favor of Pakistan.
If you look into detail at the statements that Mr. Modi made in his address to the rally, he has significantly pointed towards Pakistan for a lot of anti-state activities within India and in Kashmir also, not naming Pakistan, but then hinting very obviously towards it. And of course, this comes in after Prime Minister Imran Khan in his earlier address in Pakistan had said that anybody who tries to infiltrate into Kashmir is an enemy of Pakistan and of Kashmir. But the fact remains that this is part of the way India has always played the issue and has always blamed Pakistan for the terrorist activities present in India. But given the fact that such a large number of people participated and that Donald Trump was also there, it seems that those claims are taking precedence over the ones our Prime Minister is making.
Obviously, I think that Mr. Trump's presence over there, and he continued to stay during the speech full time with Mr. Modi, that shows clearly where he stands, where American stands, where American administration stand, and what their stance would be when they would be making sit India and Pakistan across the table, though it is not possible in the near future. I think that this is actually the legacy the US is following since 9/11. Since 9/11, they have reduced all sort of freedom fighters, movements for right of self-determination, asking for their rights, to just terrorism. And they, if you are not making peace, if you are not addressing people's legitimate rights, not giving them basic human rights, denying them right of self-determination, they would certainly come out and they will make their struggle for that. That may be peaceful, but if you are not listening then that peaceful struggle may be violent. And the Kashmiri struggle is basically indigenous, and that is the response of overwhelming number of security agencies there. 7-to-1 is the largest, or rather biggest ratio of civilian population to military men. And having said that, it is very, very ridiculous that then you claim that you are the biggest democracy of the world. And obviously, knowing the American history, they have reduced the indigenous Native Americans to 0.4% of the total population. At such a large scale, these whites conducted genocide on the American continent when they occupied, and that continued for centuries. So, having that track record of human rights violation of local population, that match with obviously India. India is doing the same in Kashmir, violating all human rights, having the largest jail of the world, and still they are shaking hand with each other and claiming themselves the largest democracy. That I think that both are having the same policies and same intentions towards the Kashmiris, what Americans did with their native population.
Right, and we also see that the protests that were taking place outside the venue were not just with regards to Kashmir, but also with regards to other policies within India, including the NRC and situations happening in Assam or the springing up of detention centers in India. And all of this was part of the protest, so it wasn't just related to Kashmir. However, when Modi spoke, he said that everything is fine with India, and this sentiment was echoed by Mr. Trump also, who said that Modi is doing a truly exceptional job for India. When we see these statements, it seems that whatever policies that Modi's government is implementing or is following does not seem to be a problem for the superpower.
Yeah, I think that Modi has created a stance. He is selling his particular stance for the first term, for his last term, and now again he was successful in selling that point of view, that stance that he is doing everything for the progress of India and the progress of RSS, Hindutva culture, and suppressing all the minorities is I think that is ignored by the whole world. Actually, Americans, they never came out of that Cold War psyche that they wanted to encircle certain powers in South Asia, and whenever some power is rising, American come again on the point that they are having Cold War psyche. They have been doing during Cold Wars. Now China is rising and India is sharing border with China, and at this point of time you see that Ladakh is very important, where the largest population, largest number of Buddhists are living there, and certainly they have close relations with China as compared to India. And Ladakh is a part of this disputed territory, and when they claim themselves that they are going to revoke 370, actually they are going to nationalize that area, and their army would be stationed more, their control would be high, and in this way they could be able to disrupt the CPEC projects again and again.
Right. We have been joined by Ms. Mariam, who has joined us from the US to talk more about this issue. She's a journalist. Thank you for being with us on PTV World.
Thank you.
Right. Mariam, of course, you know that Prime Minister Imran Khan is present in the US to highlight the resolve of the Kashmiris and, of course, their just struggle to the right of self-determination. He's had plenty of meetings, but the most important one is yet to come with President Donald Trump. What do you expect to come out of that?
It would be great if Imran Khan is able to have Donald Trump mediate between the two countries. Earlier on his previous trip, Donald Trump did say that he would be willing to mediate, and actually that Modi had approached him. I know there was a lot of backlash from India, saying that it's a bilateral issue and they don't want any interference from anyone else. But if Prime Minister Imran Khan is able to get Donald Trump to mediate or to give some strong statements so the two countries can talk, that would go a great way to relieve tensions in the region.
Right. We also saw earlier that there was this huge rally in which both the Indian Premier and President Donald Trump was present. But we also know that a large number of protests were also held outside the venue. Do you by any chance understand the sentiments that the allies that were outside the venue, and what were they protesting against, and what were the sentiments of the people there?
Yes, there are reports that it was anywhere between some say 7,000 to 10,000 to there were reports up to 20,000 people outside. They were holding signs comparing Modi, some of them quite extreme to Hitler, some of them saying that India is responsible for terrorism, others, just from all walks of life, whether they are Americans and Pakistani Americans, Indian Americans, who are not happy that Modi and Trump are sharing the stage, and are against some of the, values that they are portraying, whether it's white nationalism or the extremism that we're seeing in India.
In light of the statements made by the Indian Premier in this rally, do you think that there is any possibility of a meeting between President Trump, Imran Khan, and Modi, as President Donald Trump had earlier hinted at?
If Donald Trump can put some pressure on Modi for that, I think there is a possibility um, because the two seem to have really good chemistry and they had a great meeting yesterday. But the rhetoric that we heard from Modi doesn't sound very promising. He did, taunt Pakistan that they're not able to take care of their own internal issues and tried very hard to associate Pakistan with harboring terrorists. So if there can be dialogue and a meeting of the three, that would be very helpful.
Right, of course, Prime Minister Imran Khan is scheduled to address the UN General Assembly on the 27th of September. What do you think his highlighting of the struggle of the Kashmiris will resonate with the international community or not?
I think that if he makes a strong case for the humanitarian issue and the crisis that can, continue if these communication barriers and human rights violations continue to take place, and the bad press that India has been getting, and the alarming reports of torture and of boys as young as 14 being incarcerated. I think that that is a strong case, and if he makes that case of why the international community and the rest of these world leaders should be supporting Pakistan, should be supporting the Kashmiri people more than even supporting Pakistan, I think he can make a strong case. Um, Pakistan also needs to kind of clean up its own internal matters as well so that it can be taken more seriously on the world stage. But Imran Khan can definitely, he has a great opportunity right now to make his case to the world community because everybody will be listening.
Right, and what tangible aspects do you think that the United Nations can take after this UN General Assembly session in terms of actually bringing about some change in the suffering of the Kashmiris?
I know that there was a deadline for the UN Human Council on the Human Rights that Pakistan was not able to garner enough support to be able to pass a resolution or even to have the resolution on the floor. So this is a concern. I think Pakistan needs to do more in with diplomacy and to get more support. But just having a statement from other world leaders, having that support, and working towards some steps where India can be held in check for the human rights violations, and know that the world community is watching and is not just going to turn a blind eye.
Right, we hope that too. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Mariam, a journalist from USA, speaking to us regarding, of course, what can be expected out of the meeting with President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Imran Khan, and whether or not a real solution is going to come out of the UN General Assembly session. Ma'am, what do you think of the capacity that the UN has? Of course, it is a world body, and we expect a passionate address, and a lot of hope is set on what Prime Minister Imran Khan is going to say and what is going to come out of it. But as we were talking earlier to Ms. Mariam Kaur, there needs to be a lot more support coming in from the international community. But for the UN to take action, that shouldn't be necessary if there's a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. Is that so?
Uh, uh, we are more positive about it, but I think that things are 50-50. And as you were talking to Mariam, and she said there are possibilities that there might be a trilateral meeting of Prime Ministers of India and Pakistan and Mr. Trump. There is a possibility, but still hopes are very slim. I think that Mr. Modi is very unpredictable person. Same is the case with Mr. Trump. But Modi is a big planner. If through this show of power, having a long list of side meetings with other countries and other regions, Mr. Modi would see that how far he is able to gather the support of international community, and if he perceives that he is going to lose in General Assembly, then he would certainly meet Imran Khan. And if he would be confident that there would be no resolution against India in General Assembly, then the situation would be vice versa and different. UN General Assembly is a big resolution, is a big achievement from Pakistan, if there would be any. And that would be a signal that international community is taking notice of the situation. But you see that that is not binding on the world, or that is not binding on any member.
Exactly. And even if we've had the previous UN Security Council resolutions on Kashmir, they don't seem to be binding as well.
Exactly. And you see that all the resolutions of UN Security Council are binding, and they are implemented when there is a will of big powers or superpowers,
exactly,
or at least the permanent members of the UN Security Council, and they see their own interests. Resolutions are implemented within minutes, and resolutions are ignored for 72 years, you see. The whole world is saying we are watching, we are watching. What I perceive that Pakistan should expand is support base. We are focusing for the last many years on Middle East, Far East, and our surroundings. They are having their own interests. We should come out of these traditional allies which are having choice between India and Pakistan. They want to have India and Pakistan as well. So it's not possible to have cake and eat it too.
Right.
So I think that we should expand our support base to Africa. There are a number of countries in Africa having same suffering like us. They are having the dispute like us. Like today I met with a lady, she is a diplomat from Ukraine, and she was discussing the problem of Crimea. That was the same that we have Kashmir. And she was telling us that we need to share the strategies, that how can we come out of that. Similarly, in Central Asian states, Central American states, right, Caribbean states, there are problems, and we should gather their support. Instead, we should concentrate the old ones.
We'll talk more about that. We'll take a short break right now, and we'll be right back.
Nations are led by competent leaders, but it's not the case all the time. Here he comes, the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi. On so many occasions, Mr. Modi has embarrassed his own country, from awkward hugs to over-enthusiastic handshakes. From disrespecting state protocols to irritating smiles, from confused postures to idiotic exposures. On the other hand, Modi is desperately trying to overshadow this man.
Oh yeah. I want you to work it for me like this.
The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, a former cricketer turned politician with a background of Oxford. Khan quickly made his name on the world stage as a true statesman. Unlike Modi, Khan enjoys a respectable reputation all around the world, with media always hanging around him. While Modi has to fake it all, Khan simply gets it all. When Khan was building a cancer hospital, Modi was busy massacring the Muslims of Gujarat. The way Khan is getting along with the world community is nerve-wracking for Modi. with the upcoming address of Khan at the UN General Assembly, where he is all set to expose India's grave human rights violations in Kashmir, Indian diplomatic shutdown is imminent. According to CJ Post, Modi has been instructed very firmly by the White House, no hugs, please. According to our sources, Melania Trump is trying hard to avoid even a handshake with Mr. Modi. The same Melania was seen excited to meet Khan during his recent visit to the U.S.
Welcome back to The World Today. We have now been joined by senior analyst, Brigadier Retired Mr. Shahid Jaquir. Thank you for being with us, sir. Sir, just to fill you up with the conversation that we were having earlier, of course, we're talking about the rally that has earlier taken place in which the Indian Premier Modi and President Donald Trump were also present. And some very substantial claims have been and statements have been made by the two leaders, both showering heaps of praise on each other and both showing a lot of support for each other, which does not seem to bode too well for Pakistan. What do you make of it?
Thank you very much. I think you see this rally in the context of the elections which are coming up in America. So the support of the Indian community which is over there, that's very important for the Trump in the coming elections. Having said that, no doubt the Americans and Indians have a strategic alliance. The South Asian power struggle which is going on, the Americans badly need the Indians. But nevertheless, this doesn't undermine the importance of Pakistan. President Trump has many a time have said that he is ready to mediate between Pakistan and India. And Prime Minister is going to meet today, in today's schedule, he is about to meet with the President Trump. And I think that the good sense will prevail, both in the Americans as well as in the Indians. And we come on to a consensus where the parties come on the table and start talking about the differences which they have, not only for the peace and security of India and Pakistan, but for the South Asia and the whole world as a whole.
Right. Of course, the elections are an important factor in this. And another thing that people are pointing towards is, of course, the possibility of a trade deal between the two sides as well. And we know that trade relations were affected earlier between India and America, and they're looking to change that now. Could that also be one of the major reasons of the support that we see?
Yeah, obviously, Brigadier Saab is right that election support is very important. But I think that this is more of a show of power, that Mr. Trump wants to show that he has won a side of the world, that is South Asia, and South Asian community is with him. And you know, he started with downtrodden communities of the US, and not the intellectuals, not the educated people, but he took minorities, but they were the people with less stature in US politics earlier. So I think that this time Indian American support would be important, because Mr. Modi is wanted to penetrate American policies, and we have read that some lady from Indian origin, she is also a presidential candidate, supposed to be time will determine, but then but Indian support is very important for Mr. Trump, that he want to have a big economic, big strategic and deal, as well as he wanted to secure Pacific Indo policy as well.
Right.
And in this way he would be able to control the whole trade route of the world, as we are just discussing.
Right, but of course, when we see statements from the Supreme Leader, the US President saying that we're not going to let the Islamic radical extremism affect the innocent people of India. So what are we really expecting the US's role to play if the kind of support that he's trying to garner, and understandably why, but then again, if the relations between India and US are so strong, are we really going to first ever expect a mediation? And then even if there is one, isn't it not going to be inclined towards India?
And I think these statements does not match to American values. American values are basically human rights, to stop human rights violation, egalitarian society and democracies. And in democracies, American value is that protection of minority rights first. And that is not the majority rule, rather majority rule and protection of minorities. So I think that Americans should, they are supposed to stress Mr. Modi to protect their, protect his minorities. And minorities are, by the way, not only Muslims, they are Dalits,
Of course.
55
Even the Sikhs and Christians.
Dalits are basically the Christians, and they are going to convert them one by one, as they have started this movement come back home. Come back home means that everyone was Hindu before that, before conversion. So they should go back to their Hinduism again. And when they refer to this extremism, Islamic extremism, I quoted somewhere that there was a statement of former Indian CNC, and he said that the roots of Islamic extremism comes from Middle East. So the Middle Eastern brethren now are brethren, they are thinking that they are aloof from that, and this is not Muslim Ummah's issue. They have to face the music once they would subjugate South Asian Muslim countries, and then they would go to the Middle East. And you see that in Middle East what Americans are going to do. They have increased their number of troops on the request of KSA, and that would be, if there would be war, then again the both sides would be the loss of Muslim Ummah.
Right.
So we should be alarmed of
Right,
that.
and of course these policies that are being followed in India are quite alarming, not just for the Muslims but also other minorities, as you mentioned. But of course we see that even though the protests that were happening outside Houston were also against all of these policies and not just against Kashmir. So what I earlier asked ma'am as well. But then again, when we see the statements coming in from the two leaders, with President Donald Trump also saying that Modi is doing an exceptional job for India, then it seems that whatever fascist ideology is being followed by the Modi government, it does not seem to be such a huge problem for the world.
Look, as far as the Indian national interest is concerned, yes, you may say that Modi is doing a very good job and all. But as my colleague has said, that Islamic radicalism is a term which is very common for anything. There is no Islamic radicalization in India at the moment. If you see the RSS agenda and the nexus of BJP government, RSS and Shiv Sena, so it is the Hindu extremism which is prevailing in India. You see the human rights violations in India committed by these people, not only against the Muslim, but also against the Christians and Buddhists and others.
Yes, but the term that is used by President Donald Trump is radical Islamic extremism, not radical Hindu extremism.
That's what I'm saying. India is propagating the Kashmir struggle as a terrorist struggle, Islamic radicalism trouble. Whereas it is not, it's a right of the self-determination which has to be decided by the UN Charter according to the UN resolutions. And also, I want to make a point over here at the point of at the time of the General Assembly meeting in 1998. After the nuclear explosion of both the countries, there was a meeting of the foreign ministers of permanent fives in UN, and there was a consensus declaration that there is a requirement that both countries should be pursued to come together and sort out their issue. Now is the time that these all decisions which have been taken, they should be implemented, and that is what Prime Minister Imran Khan is going to inshallah talk about. People at the European side and Americans are looking at the thing from a different angle. Now, we do not forget about, or we side away the American interest in the South Asia, and especially in the Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and China, where the CPAC is coming. That is why we are talking. We see the Indians talking about taking the Pakistani side of the Jammu and Kashmir also. This is the major issue, which is an alliance, which is a big cause of the biggest alliance between America and the US. And as my colleague is saying, if you see the Indo-Pacific the strategy of the Americans, if you see the containment China strategy of the Americans, if you see the American policy in Afghanistan, so these two nations' interests converge with each other, and it is a very common thing in the international politics. Whenever you are allies, whenever your interests are converged. But at the same time, I would say that the American establishment and with due respect, President Trump is forgetting the sacrifices Pakistan has done against the terrorism. We have laid down over 100,000 people, including the soldiers. You see in Afghanistan, American army has not lost even one general officer. And how many we have lost? How many brigadiers have embraced Shahadat? How many colonels have embraced Shahadat? And what the Americans have suffered as far as that thing is concerned. Our operations in the FATA are the classic examples of counterinsurgency. Now, even despite all this, we have suffered, economically $130 billion. So even then, if they do not recognize that we are the one who are fighting for the cause of curbing the terrorism, and India, which is not allowing a peace to prevail in Afghanistan, whenever there is a peace talk, whenever there is a move toward the peace in Afghanistan, it is the one country, which is India, which is putting the spanner in the system and trying to stop it. So it is the time, and people over there also recognized it. The violations the Indians are doing, their senators have talked a lot about it. They have written even letter to the president. So I think talking something in the public and sitting backdoor and talking seriously at the Prime Minister level, things will be different.
Okay, would you like to add something?
Yeah, Imran Khan met some of the senator today, and he was having a very fruitful meeting. And as Brigadier Saab is saying, that Mr. Trump is having actually the convergence of interest with Mr. Modi. If you remember, Mr. Trump was the man when he inaugurated in White House, and he put restrictions of traveling to 7 Muslim countries, and they were all Arabs, and previously they were living with peace, and it was American administration, they started adventure over there. So I think that I wonder that which person should be named as terrorist, all the 3-4 American presidents in a row, or these innocent people who are being killed. 11 million people in Middle East are killed. They are overwhelmingly Muslim. I would not say that they are all Muslims, but overwhelmingly Muslims. And who are responsible for their killing? and who is going to respond. You know, they are having a nexus against and they say that there is Islamic terrorist movement, and you see that Islamic countries are divided into 57 countries. None of them agree with each other. They are not having any coherent policy. They are failed to make a bloc in the form of OIC, but India is united, is a single country. And you know, 1.2, 1.3 billion Hindus, when they would emerge out of this confidence that they have eradicated all their enemies, then where Mr. Trump would be and where the Western world would be.
Still, of course, the phenomenon of radical Islamic terrorism still prevails in the larger public. And when we see people such as Modi presenting similarities in front of an audience, saying that whether it is 9/11 or the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, he was hinting towards, of course, involvement of Islamic radical terrorism. But in that regard, do you not think that for the population which has elected Donald Trump into power, it will have a large impact on public opinion, which of course shapes all of the policies?
Well, I think one thing is to be clarified. You know, Mr. Modi yesterday said that it is Islamic fundamentalism that they attacked on 9/11 and then on Mumbai. You know, there is no similarity. There was no proof. They attacked on Iraq on the pretext of weapon of mass destruction, and there was none. Similarly, they attacked on Afghanistan and then Osama bin Laden, and now he is no more. And what about what is the reason to stay in Afghanistan if that Al Qaeda is eradicated from there? These policies of targeting one nation as one religion, considering them a single nation, is flawed, and that is going to American have to repay. The second thing which I want to point out, Americans are thinking in different direction, but you know, Europe has changed. Europe has changed, and they are feeling more humanistic sentiments that is pro Kashmir after the demonstration of Kashmiris. You know, in all European capitals, Kashmiris are demonstrating, and they are joined by the local population for human rights violation and hostage as Kashmiris are right now. So one day that policy has to be reversed, but right now Indians and Americans are having this nexus, and this would continue till the election, re-election of Mr. Trump, I think.
Right. Okay. Mr. Jagir, I would like to ask you the fact that, of course, after such warm sentiments that have been expressed by President Donald Trump towards Premier Modi, what sort of a meeting are we expecting between Mr. Trump and Imran Khan?
Okay. I think it's going to be a very crucial. We should not have very high hopes about this meeting. In my personal point of view, I think if you know, at least this is one thing is done, that President Trump make them sit together, talk together, and he convince Mr. Modi to lift the curfew immediately so that the people of Kashmiris are at ease. The life comes to a bit normal over there, and then our roadmap is chalked out to talk to each other and resolve the issues. If these 3-4 points are addressed by mediation of Americans, I think it will be a good start. As was done by the Vajpayee, that after the nuclear explosions, the UN Secretary General and President and others, they wrote him the letter, and he agrees on the discussion, and ultimately that turned out to be in the Agra summit, in which the people say and the history says that we were very close to finding out a solution of the Kashmir, but at the 11th hour it was, you know, again Indians put the spanners in the thing, and it could not materialize. It is very important that we do, because what the language unfortunately Mr. Modi has used, he is you know, banging the war drums. His army chief, now the chief of defense staff, is banging the war drums. which is not good for South Asia, especially and the world as a whole.
Absolutely.
Because war and orchestra are two things which are easy, very difficult to start, and then very difficult to conclude.
And they're not even a solution at the end of the day anyway.
There is no solution, and it goes in a chain reaction.
Right.
The other side always go in the upstairs in the ladder. No one wants to go down. So where we will end up? The world should see this is the right time. Where 200 world leaders are going to attend the UN Assembly session, they must wait that what is the cost the world is going to pay for this.
Right.
For all this.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much for being with us and for having this conversation. Of course, more will be clear when we see the meeting being held between Prime Minister Imran Khan and President Donald Trump, and whether or not we're going to be expecting some positive sentiments from President Donald Trump for the struggle of the Kashmiris, who, of course, are suffering since the 5th of August, and it is the 50th consecutive day where, of course, the curfew and lockdown restrictions still continue. Of course, Prime Minister Imran Khan will be raising the issue effectively on the 27th of September, but what the world does about it is still remain to be seen. Thank you for watching.